Rassie Erasmus has named a 54-man alignment squad for an upcoming camp happening both in Cape Town as well as online, which features 3 newcomers in the form of Joano Augustus, Vincent Chituka, as well as Interkozo Makaza, the UCT sensation, who went back-to-back Varsity Cup Player of the Season. But it's almost as important who is included as who isn't included, because we've now got 85 names which have all featured on a Springbok alignment camp list. However, that 85 has already been cut down to 54. And what's very interesting is to see the 21 players who have been excluded. Also, obviously, a couple of players involved in injuries at the moment. And for some other players, I think this is a bit of a sign from Rassie Erasmus that they're very much on the fringe, but not quite as sort of close to being part of a final Springbok squad or a Springbok team as they might not like. And I thought we'd take a bit of a dive into the entire squad and kind of look at exactly who's been kept and who has been sort of not discarded so far, but who has not been included in the alignment camps, which will take place next week. Before we do that, please do smash a like on the video. Please do subscribe to the channel as well. Let's have a look, shall we? Because it's a very interesting name. So in the front row, we've got 2 injuries in Frans Malherbe and Frans Malherbe and Trevor Inyakani. So those 2 players were not considered. Now, if we look at this sort of table, basically, and we're going to be doing this throughout the year, that is their age, obviously position, and type of 4 they are. That just helps us from a cataloging point of view. What is important is that the on the right hand side is their age at the 2027 Rugby World Cup. So if you're under 30, you're in the green. If you're 30 to 35, you're in the orange, and if you're 35 plus, you're in the red. So immediately, for example, we can see that 2 players who will be 36 and 38 at the next World Cup are currently injured, and Vincent Koch in between them very much sort of shows you why we've got a bit of a tight head problem, which is why it's important that the likes of Thomas du Toit, Wilco Loan, Asnati, and Klabakanya, as well as Nitin Vishay, have all been included. Those are all tight head options. What for me is very interesting is if you look at the hookers, 4 hookers have been excluded from this alignment camp. No Ethan Bester, which is maybe not a surprise. No Joseph Dweber, though. And I think the fact that he's moving on to overseas might mean that his Springbok sort of career could very much stall. Aka van der Merwe not involved, and Jan Krabbelar not involved. Neither is Andre Hugo Venter. So I actually make that 5 hookers who have been excluded. Just the 3 out-and-out hookers that have been included. And I think the big news, obviously, Marnus van der Merwe, who's having an absolute storm of a season at the Scarlets. He's been really, really good. And I think he has actually generally put himself ahead of the likes of Andre Hugo Venter, Jan Krabbelar. And I think the big sort of interesting one is Hendrik Wessels has been retained. And he obviously offers you an option of going prop as well as hooker. So we basically sort of treat this as a very much an extended squad. If we then look, for example, into the locks, also quite interesting to sort of see how it all plays out. So we've got the likes of JF van Heerden and Nicholas Jans van Rensburg who have been excluded from the squad. Everybody else has been sort of kept around here. So Lua Diaga is continuing to sort of make a sort of return potentially. Cobus Visa being retained is quite an interesting one. I think that I agree with it. I think he's been really good. And I think that they're sort of next to each other, but similar ages, Cobus Visa, Salman Murat, and I think vying very much for that backup spot for Eben Etzebeth. You then got alongside the likes of an Archie Snyman. And then your number 5 options are Franco Mossad, Lua Diaga, Ruan Okia, and Oxtema can also play there. So it's a nice depth, and I think we've got a lot of lock options there. But the main thing is looking at, for example, the fact that Franco Mostert might be a bit old in the next World Cup. But to be fair, our locks for all of these are the same locks. We won the 2019 World Cup. They're not going to be that old at the next World Cup. Archie's name will be 32. Eben Etzebeth will be 35. But Lua Diaga will still be 34. He obviously missed that World Cup. And Archie Snyman still in and around there. And then we've got nice players coming through in that sort of area. One of the big positions that have taken a bit of a battering when it comes to changes, excuse me, is our loose forward. So Dion Fourie, Albert Lowe, Ben Jason Dixon, all currently injured, but lots of players being left out. No Rand Ludwig, no Dan de Preer, no Sinampilo Gumedi, no Franco Horn, no Pepsi Buthelezi, no Evan Lewis. We'll talk about that in a second. No Ruan Venter as well. So I think the big sort of exclusions there are, for me, are Evan Lewis and Ruan Venter. Those are 2 players who are capped. And I think Ruan Venter can obviously play at lock and at loose forward. I think that he's somebody who I think should probably be involved. I can sort of, you look at some of the back row, I would probably have him ahead of a Jean-Luc Dupré. I think he covers as many positions, and he's obviously much younger, being 22 years old, one of the youngest guys actually that has been involved in the Boks squad so far this season. But Evan Roos not being involved, Vincent Tuka, as well as João Augustus being called up, is a very, very interesting move. And I think that shows that Evan Roos maybe not been at his best so far this season. And the Bok managers are going to look at options. So João Augustus, Vincent Tuka, those are two big names. They've only just been added to the Bok squad. And again, look at those age profiles. 28, 29 at the next World Cup. Really, really good age profiles for players you want there. There's also been quite a big strong culling at Scrumhalf, but we did have a tremendous amount. So no Paul de Vet, no Ambrose Appiah, no Nico Steyn, no Herschel Yankees. And I think maybe the only frustration part is the fact that two of those guys very much in the green for the next World Cup, and Ambrose Appiah in particular, I think he's been playing some great rugby. I think he's quite unfortunate, but we have retained Faf de Klerk, Jaden Henderson, Kobus Reinhardt, Grant Williams, as well as Morne van den Berg, the youngest. Him and Jaden Henderson, the two youngest in that sort of the mix over there. Faf de Klerk and Kobus Reinhardt, very much sort of nearing, the latter stages of their career. In terms of Flyhalf, we've retained quite a few. We've just released Siya Masuku. Well, not released, but hasn't been invited. Jordan Hendricks has been included despite maybe not being at his best in the last few weeks, the last few months. Sajifai Mngomezulu, of course, is there, as is Mark Niebach, who will make his return to action tomorrow for the Stormers. Quite a few centers also. No Jonathan Roach, I think was a surprise call-up. No Jorente Julius, who is youngster, and this was more about experience. But no David Creel is quite an interesting one. No Hickovan Blake, I think, is purely down to the injury. So the only sort of non-standard center that's been retained is Ethan Hooker, which shows you how highly they rate him. And I do think that he's very much coming to the time where he will get his opportunity. And then finally, if we look at our outside backs, no Suleiman Hartzenberg, no Sebastian de Klerk, but everybody else pretty much being retained, as well, sort of likes of Willie Leroux, April Fassi, will contend with Damien Willemse, who's very much back in the mix for that spot at the back there. And the big news is Intercausa Makaza, the 23-year-old from UCT. But Hartzenberg, I think, is an interesting one to have excluded. Sebastian de Klerk, I don't think we're too surprised. But as you can see, there's just so many outside backs. The position where we've just got so many options. I mean, at fullback, you've got Fassi, you've got Willemse, you've got Quine Horn, you've got Willie. That's before you go to a Colby, you can play there. And Intercausa Makaza, you can probably play there. If you look at your wings, even Kane Moody can play cover at centre. So it's very interesting to see the players who are excluded, because a lot of them are the youngsters. You look, for example, immediately through these sort of players over here, and they're all in the green. So it is a lot of the youngsters who are uncapped who have kind of been left out. The big ones, I think, who are capped and not featuring are the likes of an Evan Roos. I think that's a pretty interesting call. For example, I think that Ruan Fent is an interesting call. I think that no Joseph Dwebe or Johan Kroblo and Hugo Fent, I think those three are quite interesting in itself. Apart from that, most of them are kind of the fringe players. So it is a relatively predictable squad, except for the likes of an Evan Ruins dropping out. He's probably the big name that hasn't been retained in this squad. What do you think of the lineman camp group? Let me know down in the comments below. Smash the like on the video. Subscribe to the channel as well. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Steve. I'll chat to you soon.